everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Silver Spook podcast. I'm Silver Spook Christian Miller, and I'm excited to be here today with...
My name is Jonas Waever, and I was the lead designer on the Nameless Mod for Deus Ex, and I am currently the creative director of Logic Artists.
So the Nameless Mod, if you listen to this podcast, most people who listen to this podcast should know Deus Ex by now. Deus Ex is like basically, it's lauded as one of the best cyberpunk games of all time. If you have a top cyberpunk, 10 cyberpunk games of all time, it shows up there somewhere. And so, generally speaking, like I got into Deus Ex, I think I was like 18 or so when I started playing it. And then when I first played it, it was kind of like, it was, nowadays everybody talks about dropping the red pills, and I don't know what the kids are saying nowadays and the woke and all that stuff. But when I played Deus Ex, it was kind of like my first experience into the cyberpunk world. I had never read any William Gibson. I had not I think I might have seen The Matrix like accidentally, but I had never like really. I was not really in that for a lot until I played like Deus Ex. It was kind of like my gateway drug into that world. So I basically fell in love with it. I played it, and I still play it like every year. I reinstall Deus Ex, and hopefully somebody is listening to this podcast and reinstalling Deus Ex. And later on, I played it. I started getting into the modding community. I was actually doing some modding before. I was doing Half-Life 1 mods before Deus Ex, and then I played it and I loved it. Loved everything about it. And then I found the Nameless mod later on. Downloaded that, which is a mod for Deus Ex, and like I think I mentioned it recently in a live stream I just did. That it's like basically, it's like one of the best mods. I think it's pretty much the biggest mod. It's the longest, and I think it's pretty much the biggest undertaking of all the total conversion mods. I loved it. I played it I can't remember how many times I've played it. It's like I think the quality of it is like basically on the content of it is basically like pretty much on par with Deus Ex. I think it might even have a little bit more content, and so I guess I'm trying to get back into Deus Ex. I was just trying to remember like what made Deus Ex, the first Deus Ex, really great, and why it's still on the top 5 games of all time. Because of this, I'm going to be working on a new project where we're kind of in the pre-concept phases of a new project that's to create an indie commercial game by a small team that's trying to do all the things that Deus Ex 1 got right. You can give your opinions on why Deus Ex deserves a top 10 games of all time list. Maybe what I think is, it has to do with, and I think a lot of people have said this, it's the organic, emergent gameplay of a lot of these interacting systems, the combat system, the hacking system, the electronic. There's a lot of these real world, like many different systems that you can use to achieve. There's a single goal per level, but there's just so many ways you can do it, and it doesn't hold your hand. Like player choice and player freedom, and trusting the player's intellect is like those are the key things. Apart from the cyberpunk conspiratorial plot, which is like the atmospheric world building is just is like very deep. And I think a lot of people have said that the graphics is probably not the strongest point of Deus Ex, to put it like really lightly. But anyway, so that's kind of what my basic thoughts on it. So I don't know. You can say what do you think? What do you think? Why is Deus Ex why does it still deserve that place? Do you think?
I think, to be honest, to completely understand why Deus Ex is held in such high regard is you need to see it in its historical context. It's kind of like, this is gonna sound like the biggest cliche, but it's kind of like the video game version of Citizen Kane, in the sense that it did so many new things. It introduced so many new design techniques, narrative techniques that are now commonplace in the games industry, and we don't really think about any of these things anymore as being new or different. We just sort of take it for granted. And if you go back and play Deus Ex now and you don't consider that historical context, I'm pretty sure you'll find very little there to actually stand out, simply because all of its innovations have kind of been absorbed into the games industry, into the games medium, Same way, if you go back and watch Citizen Kane now, it's gonna seem entirely unremarkable, but that's because you don't realize that half of those camera techniques had never been used before, and that the entire, narrative structure of it was so new and groundbreaking. To me, Deus Ex was the first game that really introduced to the mainstream the idea of a branching narrative that was still told in a sort of dramatically impactful way. You sort of, before that, you had two options. You could either do these vast sprawling open worlds that just let you do whatever, like Ultima or something, or you could have like no story at all, basically. And then Half-Life came in and introduced the idea of, or at least cemented the idea of having a very cinematic, very tightly controlled narrative experience. And to me, Deus Ex was where that promise really was fulfilled, where they demonstrated that you could have the openness and the choices, and you could feel as a player that you had an impact on how things played out, and at the same time had an engaging narrative. It had drama, it had memorable characters, it had all the things that you wanted from a story.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much basically I agree with basically everything you said. Well, here's another big question. So if Deus Ex was the greatest game of all time, as you said, like, a lot of the innovations have kind of like percolated throughout the games industry, and kind of like there's games that have done individual. I think there's games that have done individual things from Deus Ex 1, like take any of the hacking. Is better in certain games. Some of the RPG elements are in like games like the Fallout franchise. Okay, here's a question: is there any game you think that approaches that approaches Deus Ex, the first, that has been created since then, or what is the closest that any game has come to it?
That's a hard question. I mean, to be completely honest, it's probably the sequels, right? I mean, Human Revolution did a lot of things right in terms of following up on Deus Ex and modernizing it. Sure, they lost a few things in the process, but I think it was a really good effort at maintaining that special sauce that Deus Ex had. Other than that, I mean, you can see the sort of immersive sim, that sort of subgenre of video games, or would you call it, a design paradigm, has been represented in other games, like the Elder Scrolls series has a little of it. The Dishonored series has a lot of it. The Prey 2 that just came out this year, which is also by the Dishonored guys, also has very clear ancestry back to Deus Ex and to System Shock. So the whole first-person RPG genre, which comes up once in a while, but I think especially with the Elder Scrolls game, or anything Bethesda puts out, you can definitely tell that they've learned a thing or two from Deus Ex. And then in terms of the emergent gameplay, you can see that in a ton of games. I actually think that a lot of Ubisoft games show this really well. They're very maligned for many reasons, but for example, the Far Cry series shows a lot of that sort of emergent gameplay shenanigans with simulating certain systems that then create stories for the player, like fire spreading, and then the AI switches all their attention to avoiding that, and then it burns down a whole building, and it ends up setting fire to yourself, and all this kind of stuff. So even though it doesn't have the feel of a Deus Ex game, you can tell that they're carrying on the torch, so to speak.
Okay, so I kind of see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess I haven't played that many first-person shooters after a certain point in time, in the FPS RPG hybrids. The Fallout, all the Fallouts, of course, but part of that has to do with the hardware that I can't run very high level stuff, and also I got really busy with other things. But I guess here's something. Recently, this may be going a little off, but recently this year it was announced that I can't remember what huge company said, we're not the single player first person narrative games, or single player narrative games, I think, are done. Somebody said that. They might not be done yet, but I think the AAA studios, which people, that's a whole can of worms, but What do you feel about that comment? I can't remember who said that. Was it from the head of EA Games? Let me just check that.
Yeah, that
real
was
quick.
EA. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that's true, or what? Why is that? Why did they see saying that? What do you think about that?
So he's saying it because from a publisher standpoint, which is what EA fundamentally is, we all have to remember. From a publisher standpoint, there's way less potential for crazy profit in single player games than there are in a game that like an MMO or something with long-term sort of multiplayer player engagement, something like your Battlefields or whatever that people will just keep playing for years and years and keep buying microtransactions and so on and so forth. So if your option as a publisher, someone who's in the games industry primarily to make money, is between publish a single player narrative driven game or publish a multiplayer game with microtransactions, or even just one that counts on being able to sell expansion packs every once in a while, then you should go for multiplayer because it will make more money in the long run. You get to keep earning returns on that initial investment, whereas single player games are typically you make 90% of your sales within the first month, and then it's just a slow trickle of long tail for the next 10 years. However, no, I don't think he's right, and I think that there's plenty of games out this year to demonstrate it. We got Horizon Zero Dawn, which was a fantastic game. We got Zelda Breath of the Wilds, and we probably had some on PC as well. I don't know why my mind goes to console games that I haven't even played myself. So no, I mean, we have examples from as late as this year of single-player narrative games that were massive successes, both critically and financially.
Okay, well, that's good to hear because I was a little worried about that when I first heard it, I must admit. Being a person who makes narrative games that are not multiplayer, generally speaking. But yeah, so so I guess from there, I mean, I've talked a lot about indie games versus AAA on this podcast. Probably don't have to bash on AAA anymore. But yeah, generally speaking, like, well, let me ask you this. So indie games, and, games that are not game developers who are not in it just to make $1 trillion. I don't know, I'm one, I would count myself as one of those. I did release a game this year on Steam. I already mentioned that releasing games in 2017 kind of sucks relative to releasing games on Steam in basically any other year because of the flood. Every year it gets harder because of the flood of games. That's one of the big problems I talked recently about was the what do you call it, the flood, the great deluge of indie game releases that is making it difficult to get a spotlight. I don't know. I checked up on your company. As I understand it, you release. I haven't played them, but your company has released a couple games recently or within the last few years, correct?
Yeah, we put out our first game, Expeditions Conquistador, in 2013, and then a very different game, Clandestine, in 2015, and then this year we've released Expeditions Viking, which is the sequel to our debut game. Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think about? I don't know. What do you think about the game market now? As would you count yourself as an indie studio? What do you think about where things are going?
Yeah. We are an indie studio. In most respects of the word. Yeah, it's gotten a lot harder. There's no doubt about it. I'm sure everyone is sick to their stomach of hearing fucking indie developers complaining about Steam as if they owe us something, but it does suck when when we put out Expeditions Conquistador in 2013, just being on Steam meant we would sell a bunch, like a whole bunch. We were guaranteed, because back then they put out like 2 games a week, right? 2 or 3 games a week. And they already had 15, 20 million users back then. So you would go into that top banner rotation, and even if you weren't selling anything initially, you would be in that top rotation for about a week probably. And just from being there, your game would be shown to maybe 5 million people, and statistically a fair few of them were bound to click on it, and then a certain portion of those would buy it and so on. So just being on Steam meant you would sell a fair bit of games. And then when Clandestine came out in 2015, that was post Greenlight, and we didn't have to go through Greenlight because we were already an approved publisher on Steam. That was a lot harder already, but it's hard to judge with Clandestine because it was kind of an awkward game for many reasons that I don't know if I should go into. So the real comparison is definitely Viking to Conquistador, and we made a big splash with Viking. We actually got a lot of attention initially. We went on the top. We had 3 out of the 4 top spots on the sort of top sellers list for a couple of days. So we were doing pretty well, but even then, the sales have been surprisingly low considering that. Like, you'd expect that if you're on the top sellers list for a couple of days, at the top of the top sellers list, that you would have sold a lot of copies. And I think it kind of speaks to how poorly everyone is selling on Steam right now, that kind of exposure didn't even lead to a whole hell of a lot of sales. So yeah, it's gotten a lot harder. Just being on Steam now is worthless. You have to pour a lot of time and effort into PR and marketing alongside your launch to make sure that it's a success. You basically need to have your fan base before you start selling the game.
Yeah, I can basically say that all that is true. I think mine was Neofeud was released in what was it, September? So yeah, even later in the year. But yeah, anything in 2017. I mean, I've checked up on I've talked to other indie developers, even the creator of Techno Babylon and Primordial. Techno Babylon is another cyberpunk game that shows up on the top 10 list, and he's also said, yeah, it's kind of scary to try to release anything on Steam now. Everybody's really worried about it, and I haven't met a single indie game developer who was like, oh yeah, everything's great, I'm just gonna put it on. Yeah, so, it's fine, I'll just throw it on Steam and forget about it. I mean, the people who say the people who say that are the people who basically it's their first Steam release, and yeah, so I think that that it is interesting times, I guess, for indie game developing. There's a lot of other platforms. I mean, I don't know. Well, I guess I'm partial to itch.io because I started there, and I like the way that they do business a little bit better. They're definitely nowhere near the exposure. You're similar to Steam. You're not gonna get rich just by throwing your game up there. Probably even less so on itch, because just the 100 million plus users on Steam is still going to guarantee you a little bit more. And my Neofeud is available on both, so I can kind of gauge how that works. But the I don't know. So while we're on the topic, we don't have to go on this forever. But okay, given that what you said, you can't just release a game on Steam and then expect to make your money back or make any money or have any reviews. What do you think? And I guess one of the things is you have to do your own PR, you have to do your own marketing, you have to have your fan base. You basically have to be the thing. You have to have the traffic driven to your game and have the buyers already there. So what is, if Steam isn't like, it doesn't have that going for it, and it's still taking, we can't, as we're Steam developers, we can't say, but they're taking an industry standard, percentage. What 30%. Is the really, yeah? So yeah, what is the benefit, right? I mean, like, there's these other platforms. I mean, like, what do you think about? Is there opportunities for other platforms to kind of steal some of the, I don't want to say the M word, but steal Steam's Steam and take some market share from them? What do you think? Is there any opportunities for other platforms?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. I think they have the monopoly so thoroughly now. I mean, we're out on, as you say, you're out on itch.io, or I don't know what else. We're out on Good Old Games and Steam at the same time. And I believe Good Old Games is it's called GOG, just GOG now. So GOG is, I believe, the second largest distributor, digital distributor of games, and it's nothing compared to Steam. And I love GOG. I wish that more people would use it. I want to sell 50-50, right? My ideal situation would be 50% of the sales on GOG and 50 on Steam. It's not happening. It's like 95-5 or something, and that's ridiculous. Man. Like with a split that big, you can't touch them. So I don't know. Steam would have to massively mess up, or someone like Amazon or something. Oh, I should give them any ideas. Some even bigger player would have to launch something and just pour marketing money into it until they could compete.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that. Yeah, it is fair. I guess. Yeah, I'm looking. I guess I guess my thing would be the way I think about it is like if I'm gonna have to as an indie put out so many if I'm gonna be the one who's driving the marketing, I'd rather not pay a lot of money over. I'd rather not. I guess the one thing this team still has, even though it doesn't have the visibility, in terms of the front page of Steam, I guess they still have the player base. So number of people looking at Steam. So yeah, I guess that makes sense. I
do want to say like you still get some publicity from Steam. Like you still, the problem is you kind of have to be a success first, and then Steam will help you massively increase your success. So when we were on one of these sort of midweek madnesses, right? And we saw a huge spike in sales for that. So there's things that they can do. They can give you publicity in those ways by highlighting you a little bit. But you just sort of have to break through to that level first. You have to actually have a certain amount of sales before they're willing to give you that kind of attention. So like with so many other things in life, you have to have money to make money. You have to be a success to have success. And that sucks, but yeah, that's life.
Yeah, that's a very cyberpunk dystopian for a gaming world. Rich get richer. That's nice. Anyways, yeah. So let's maybe go back toward the topic of the immersive sims and the cyberpunk games. So let's see. So I don't know. I guess maybe we could talk a little bit about maybe the Nameless mod. Like, I mean, I don't know. Why? I've read a lot about it, so I probably don't want to retread too much ground. But I mean, like, what do you think? I mean, looking back at the Nameless mod, like, I don't know, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think like that was such a great thing, or oh my god, I just spent 7 years of my life doing free labor? What do you think about the Nameless mod? What is its place?
I'm still super proud of that thing. It's a ridiculous project, and it's like. It was ridiculous in its scope, and it was ridiculous in its contents. It's a very silly mod. And now that I occasionally go back and watch videos of it, or like boot it up, and there's a lot to cringe about. There's a lot where I wish that I could rewrite it or edit it or something, because now I know what I'm doing. But I'm super proud of it, and I'm super proud of what I learned from it. I'm really happy with what I learned from it. It was a worthwhile investment of my time. And now that I'm a professional game developer, I can attribute a lot of that career path and a lot of the mistakes I haven't made afterwards to mistakes that I made on TNM. And it's always nice to have a safe environment to fuck up in, so that you don't lose money when you fuck up later.
yeah, exactly. Early and often. Make your mistakes early and often. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely I've followed the Nameless mod. I followed all the modding community, from the early days. I mean, because as I said, I was modding Half-Life. I was like making like Half-Life 1 mods like in my bedroom, and I was like listening to like Smashing Pumpkins and like modding, making. I think I worked on like I don't know if you're familiar with this ancient. This is like antediluvian, like pre-2000 history of modding, but it was like natural selection. No, not natural selection. It was like a natural selection ripoff I worked on. I worked on like there was a Star Wars Half-Life 1 mod. They got destroyed by the IP gods because they found. I don't know if you heard about that. You heard about that one?
What was it? It wasn't natural selection. What was it called?
Okay, it was Paroxysm was the Half-Life 1 mod that I worked on. I don't know. You might not. It was a very small mod.
Oh no, I don't think so. But I was around back then. I started as Half-Life 2, Half-Life 1 mod as well, back in '99, I think.
99, yeah. There's a bunch. Yeah, that was kind of like the glory. That was kind of like the Wild West of of the modding days. That was like the internet. That was like the HTML days of modding. It was like pretty crazy characters out there. It was interesting. Well, it was like here's one difference that maybe you could talk a little bit about is like the tools that were available for voluntary mods. For anybody who's listening who doesn't know what mod is, we're talking about game modification. So you have the base game like Half-Life 1, for example. where you would you take the engine and then you basically try to either small mods. You could maybe just make a new weapon, like you make you make the splatter, the gun that shoots out hearts, or you could do silly mods. Some people made just tweak the gameplay a little bit, and then or you can make a character jump really high, or make a new skin for a new character. And then there are bigger mods, which are like the game we were talking about. The Nameless Mod is a total conversion mod, which is basically creating a whole new game using the engine, like the Half-Life 1 engine. And at this time in gaming history, there was no Unity, there was no asset store, there was no drag and drop. There's no people who are if you wanted to make a mod, you basically had to know C sharp or C. There was no C sharp. There was C++ level coding, and it took forever, and the tools are really difficult, and you type you could run it. It would take, you have to compile things, and it'll take a long time, and it'd be 50 scripts all over the goddamn place, no manuals. You're basically thrown into the jungle, cut the kudzu, and maybe you find your way out of the that zoo of code, or maybe you didn't and you just gave up, and most people did. And so I think I respect anybody who's done modding basically before 2010 or whenever it got really easy. Nowadays it's insanely easy though. I don't. Do you have any opinion on that? I mean, we're gonna sound really old and curmudgeon. This is gonna be the Silver Spook and Jonas get old and curmudgeon segment. What do you think about those young game developer kids nowadays who can just drag and drop everything in? I don't know what you think.
Yeah, of course. Back in our day, we had to walk uphill towards the computer in the snow. No. No, I don't. I mean, I haven't modded in. Actually, that's not true at all. I was working on a Shadowrun module last year.
Really?
I think it was. I think it was harder to do game development back then, and that also reflected modding, right? So, the people who made video games had worse tools, and then those of them that were nice enough to share those tools with us would then expose us to their terrible tools, which was a fantastic thing of them to do, and I genuinely appreciate that. Nowadays, it might be easier in some ways to actually just make your own game. You could download Unity, you can follow a tutorial, and you can have Snake or Tetris or whatever up and running in a day. So you can, if you're interested in game development, it's fairly easy for you to acquire a game engine and just start from scratch on something, follow some online tutorials, make something standalone. And I think the reason why the modding community was so big back then was that there were a lot of people who wanted to do game development who were interested in at least figuring out how it worked. And our only real option, if we didn't have the balls to download Visual Studio and make our own engine from scratch, was to mod an existing engine. And it was a very different way into it. So in a way, I think that it's not just that modding has gotten easier, it's that game development as such has gotten easier.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely true that to make a game, it's the barriers to entry, the skills required to entry. I mean, like everything else, the computers generally speaking, it's kind of like the eye devices kind of opened up the market, and Facebook, there's nobody, right, in 2000 or in the 80s, right, you had, my thing is always in the 80s you had PhD in computer technology were the only people that were using the internet when it was first it was the DARPA folks, right? They're basically trying to stop World War III nuclear annihilation using connecting the servers in Chicago to LA to New York to as a, and then 10 years later it's kind of a few hackers on the internet and all the hacker tropes you can trot out, and the Shadowrun, and everybody with their decks and their pink mohawks, or on their Usenet, on their altnet, and all on their IRC, right? And there's maybe I don't know, 10,000, 100,000 people, and then and then later on it's you had dial-up, and then you had the first websites. I mean, we could go through the history of the internet that way, but I'm not going to do all of it. But basically, the point is that and now you have grandma, right, who doesn't know anything about computer. You got 2-year-olds, right? They're playing. My daughter's watching the 5-Finger Family that's being generated by artificial intelligences to try to get her to click on stuff. You have basically the range of who can use computers is expanded exponentially over time. And so has the range of people who could make games similarly, right? So I think it's so now basically anybody can almost anybody can make a game nowadays. I mean, I think even I taught kids how to make. That was one of my jobs while I was modding. Was I was teaching a STEM program. I was teaching, basically it was like it was a nonprofit teaching like inner city kids, at-risk youth how to instead of like start going into dealing meth or going to prison for doing bad behaviors. Let's do some robotics. Let's do some science and technology. But part of that was there's a program called Scratch, which is like a super easy engine. It's a MIT developed educational engine for making games.
Yeah, I know.
Scratch. Yeah, so I taught Scratch basically to second graders, first graders. That would be never possible when you and I started modding in the late 90s, 2000s. And Unity is kind of like this kind of the final the evolution of that. Anyway, so I kind of I know a lot of old folks to get irritated because it's like, man, this took me forever. The kids, they might play like Terminus Machina. They're like, man, this is a horrible skin. Like, what the hell? Why does this look? Why is it so dark in here in Deus Ex? And it's like, dude, man, like this. I don't want to say anything about the graphics, but it's like it took me a long time just to get a character's face to show up, and you can just take a snapshot with your iPhone and it just like auto generates your character. Like, what the hell? Like it just the amount of effort. It can be disconcerting and somewhat annoying to hear people complaining about. But anyways, so I guess, here's something. So going forward, I don't want to get too stuck in the past and nostalgic, but going forward, like what do you think? Okay, here, Mankind Divided, right? Deus Ex Mankind Divided, not so well, or didn't do so well. It tried, I guess, but going forward, like, what do you think the possibilities are? Is there a possibility for a game that's similar to Deus Ex let's say like doing a immersive sim with the narrative story, a cyberpunk world, and the emerging gameplay by an indie studio? What do you, if you just heard that, what is that, do you think that's possible? What would be some pitfalls, or what should they not do?
Well, it'll require some pretty careful scoping, right? Deus Ex had a lot of features. It had so many features that a lot of those features ended up stepping on each other's toes. And it had a lot of content, I believe 35-ish hours of gameplay, right? Friggin' 15 missions, each with 4 levels. So, that's a big game. And you could make a game like that back then because each level didn't have that much stuff in them. So if you could find a way to, for example, have your art style help you out a little bit. Like, there's ways that you can design a game that make it less work to create, like having a very cartoonish art style, for example, or at least very stylized to the point that it looks good even if it doesn't have that much detail. Something that helps you maybe mask the fact that the rooms in the game world are somewhat empty. Something that maybe makes animations look okay even if they're a little janky and a little handmade. Like there's things you can do to help yourself out if you've bitten off more than you can chew, and I think that would be necessary if you're trying to make a modern version of Deus Ex or something like Deus Ex, but as an indie company. I think that would be really difficult if you're not careful.
Okay, yeah, that's full disclosure. I'm like writing everything down that he's saying because this guy knows what he's talking about. Anyways, I think that's absolutely correct. And this is like this. One more full disclosure. I am currently working with a group, small indie team, but by no means anywhere close to large indie or single A, anything like that. It's a very small team. But we are trying to all huge, like some of the biggest fans of just massive cyberpunk generally, and Deus Ex in particular fans, all of them. Nobody there to make a lot of money, so we're not in it for that, but we are looking to try to because it's constantly like I was just reading the Deus Ex the Steam forum. It's like somebody's asking like when are we gonna get a game like Deus Ex 1? Like when are we gonna have some new content? And it is the thing I asked myself. This is kind of like why I started modding, was because I couldn't find another game that quite did it. Like that quite felt like Deus Ex. I don't necessarily want another Deus Ex or just a Deus Ex expansion pack, but I would like a game that kind of like has a lot of those elements together. And so I'm working currently with a team. We're kind of in the early concept days, and one of the things that I'm mostly on the writing end of stuff, and there's a technical guy who's actually running an MMO, so he's this is probably going to be a little bit simple for him, I think. But the art style definitely is, I think we're definitely going for something not photorealistic. We're not going to try to compete on that level. Something like the voxel style, or there's a lot of games that are coming out like voxels. I think, is it Late Last Night that is the cyberpunk voxel style game? Yeah. So anyway, we're looking at those kind of things, because obviously you're not going to have an indie team that can make really high def stuff and have a large world that's believable and kind of doesn't have a lot of it doesn't feel too on the rails. So let's see. That is something that we're thinking about, and I'm happy to see that Deus Ex still has a overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam, because I was a little worried that maybe the kid I'm 34. I'm like Deus Ex was cool when I was 18, but maybe kids have moved on and they're not into that now. And I hope that's not the case, but it seems like people are still into that. I mean, part of it was, I was like, this is a complaint I've seen is that, the first one is like, man, these graphics are old, and it's like, well, just get revision or get one of the graphical updates. And then the second complaint is, man, like, I can't figure out what the heck to do. I'm in like Liberty Island and I keep getting killed. Like, what, and then like it's really complicated, and then I just rage quit. I don't know. On that kind of gameplay, this is something I've had friends who try to play Deus Ex and like, I can't play this game. This is too hard. What do you think is something that for modern audiences could, like, I don't know, what should that attempt be? Because it's always a trade-off, right? If you make it too dumb, right, or dumb it down too much, then you risk just not being Deus Ex, right? If you make it too smart, then 10 people like you and I and all the modding community, the veterans will play it, but nobody else will. So what do you think is a good balance between that?
I think there's a couple things. One is that it's a really intimidating first level, and it's cool in that it shows you exactly what the game is going to be about. It throws you right into what Deus Ex is all about, with the openness and the multiple approaches. It throws some. It gives you a lot of options, but for most people, I think options are not what they want straight up. They want to first get a feel for a game, understand the possibility space, and then they can start to make decisions within that possibility space. I think there's nothing wrong with having a somewhat linear and hand-holdy intro if it leads into an open world with a big possibility space later. I also think it could have benefited from a better tutorial. Like, you don't really get a feel for how the stealth works until you're like a couple of missions into the game. The tutorial itself doesn't do much to help you grok what the enemies can do. And then some interface. Just add some optional interface. I mean, that's what most modern games do, right? Especially stealth games. They have all sorts of assistants to help you see. I mean, Deus Ex doesn't even have a stealth crystal like Thief did. I mean, even Thief had some kind of interface element to show you how hidden you were. And Deus Ex is just counting on you to guesstimate it based on how lit your hand and gun is, but the lighting engine is not nearly good enough to accurately communicate that. So just having a stealth indicator or detection meter or something that starts counting up towards you have been spotted when they begin to detect you, I mean, I think that would go a long way. And you can make it disableable in case the veterans find it offensive.
Yeah, I think that's definitely correct. That's one thing I noticed is that if you giving the option, I think it's slightly tangential, but the Neophyte, the game I released, is it's just a departure from the first person genre. Neophyte is a point and click adventure, so this is basically old school, Sierra LucasArts style game. But in that space, it's the same kind of thing where you have people who, the people who were like born in 1970 something, and they are like played them in childhood, and they're like, back in that space, it's like the games are insanely difficult because of information. It's basically like you're playing this big game of like what are the level designers or what are the game designers, what were they thinking when they put the cat the puzzles like put the cat mustache, make a cat mustache with a piece of tape I don't know if you remember this. Yeah, you put shaving cat shavings and put a piece of tape and make a cat mustache. Like, what were they thinking? Right, what were they smoking when they made this puzzle? And so the game is like figure out what the developers' moon logic or what was developer thinking, and it was took forever. It took you a month to solve one puzzle. And some people like nowadays they expect the puzzles to be insanely hard. The veterans, new people are like, I'm not going to play this game because I don't have. I need to be able to find this. I need generally speaking, game design from the 80s, 90s, and early noughties was it's basically you could expect a lot more. You not expect, but the people who are playing games, similar to the fact that grandma and little kids can play games now. The people who are playing games were kind of like had to really be serious about playing the games and had to really not have any hand holding at all, or they could expect not to. Even the platforming games were a lot harder at the time. Although that's kind of coming back. Anyways, but so I guess that's true. It's trying not to turn too many people off, and also not to get then if everybody gets turned off in the first 5 seconds, then you get a Steam review bomb, and then you're done. So anyways, there's no Steve. Yeah. So okay, so that's gaming, art. In terms of like here's one more thing I've heard. Okay, so like a lot of people are saying Deus Ex. Man, there's a lot of conspiracy theories in there, and and there's a lot of they get political, but a lot of these conspiracy things, I mean, it's not the X-Files, right, was a hit show right around the time they're writing this game. Chris Carter stuff was hot. Aliens and Illuminati and the Bilderberg groups and the black helicopters. I mean, that kind of stuff was like The Matrix just came out the same year. The guy he bought his suit from the Matrix discount warehouse, or the Blade discount warehouse, I suppose. It's like the culture was different, right? So I don't know. What do you think about that? The story, the lore side of stuff. Things are a little different now, right? I don't know. What do you think about that? If you were to make a game today.
Yeah, no, I do. I do think that. I mean, we made a spy game. The Clandestine came out in 2015, and we actually talked a little bit about that. We had one of our designers really wanted to put the Bilderberg group in there and to ham up the conspiracy sort of angle to it. And we are all Deus Ex fans on the design team, but I kind of resisted it because I do think it's a little camp. I think first of all, right now it's a little iffy because it seems like conspiracy theories are like gaining a lot of traction. There's people suddenly believing that the Earth is flat, and we are all being lied to by like lizard men. And I guess the internet has just helped the crackpots kind of advance their agenda, or at least take up more space. And it's very, I don't know, I just wouldn't want to be seen as kind of contributing to that. At the same time, I mean, I think Deus Ex just like where everything was a bit over the top. Everything was a little exaggerated. And Deus Ex was one of the least over the top games narratively. Like you had Duke Nukem with him punching aliens in the face and blowing up nukes and shit. And then you had Hexen with its overly gothic kind of big preacher with a cross. I don't know. It was all really over the top. And I think that the idea of taking every single conspiracy theory and just saying, yeah, they're all true. No, totally. They are every single one of them true. I mean, that was an awesome idea. And I still think conceptually that's a great high concept. But it is very cartoony. It's a very cartoon narrative. And right now, the industry is just not really leaning into the sort of cartoon aspects of itself. Maybe it's coming back a little bit with like Doom being more like making a resurgence, and I don't know. It seems like we want our narratives to be more focused, a little more, dare I say, mature. And of course, there were plenty of ways that Deus Ex's narrative was mature, but it was always sort of mature despite its own high concept in a way, right? It was mature because the writers had philosophy degrees and pol-sci degrees or whatever. It wasn't mature because, hey, aliens are real, they're just genetically enhanced or genetically constructed beings that are there to distract the sheeple. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, no, I don't think that conspiracy angle will fly today, and I think that's also why they've they've been so careful with introducing the Illuminati in the new Deus Exes, like the Adam Jensen ones.
Yeah, I think that's definitely that's fair. It's like I haven't like I don't know. It's kind of like paying attention to culture now. It's so weird how everything is like just shifted. It's so different from what it was in that time. And I don't want to go too deep in terms of. Well, I'm in the United States, so I don't know if you heard, but the politics are kind of insane here. I don't know how they are where you are, but yeah. So
less insane.
But it's kind of like it's just different. The climate is totally different. Like I mean, it's like 9/11 hadn't even happened at the time. There was no wars. There was there's just so many things that are different now. And yeah, it's definitely like to say conspiracy, saying that word even is kind of has a totally different connotation. Back then it was like X-Files. Hey, it's a fun sci-fi romp, and now it's kind of like it's like well, you can't even make Wolfenstein apparently with pissing people off nowadays. So that's right. I mean, like that's a kind of an indication of how far it shifted. It's like Wolfenstein was just a game about killing Nazis. I mean, come on, man. Anyway, so the it's different that way. So I think that what the game they're working on, we're gonna have to really think carefully about like how we can do it. How we can make a story that's not gonna just fall flat or just be heard the wrong way. I guess I have to pay attention to successful cyberpunk, current cyberpunk. Well, I don't know. Quick tangent, maybe. So here's a cyberpunk work that has at least it's been critically successful, if not financially successful. Blade Runner 2049. I don't know if you've seen that. Have you?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So I mean, like in that one, they it's a cyberpunk world. It's just dystopian. You have a mega corporation like Deus Ex. You have lots of well, yeah, you don't have the Great Death, but you have everybody's don't have any life on the planet. That's not. I mean, there's no life apart from artificial organisms. So I think like it's a pretty bleak dystopian cyberpunk future. And I mean, I liked it. I mean, what did you think about that? What do you think about story wise? What do you think about Blade Runner 2049 and how that could relate to making a cyberpunk game? I
mean, first of all, the narrative was thematically quite focused, right? It focused in on this idea of transhumanism and androids or replicants or whatever you want to call them, and not piss off the copyright lawyers. And I think that focus is what sets it apart from something like Deus Ex. Like, I think really the only problem with Deus Ex was just the everything is true angle. Like, it's fine if your game is about that someone is manufacturing aliens to distract from something else, cool, right? And if something is about there's a bunch of business leaders that have ganged up together and they're calling themselves the Illuminati and they're trying to influence politics and so on, then great, that's very cyberpunk. I think the problem is when you start mixing all of these things together, then it becomes a very sort of over-the-top thematic mess, basically. And I think with Blade Runner, they had that laser focus. They just wanted to do a story about what identity is like when your memories are fake, when you are not a real person, when you haven't been born of a human mother, and so on and so forth. Are you still a person? Is your personality real if your memories are, and this kind of stuff? And I think that those were some pretty interesting concepts. I think that's really what matters. It's like, are the concepts that the movie or game or whatever it's dealing with, are they interesting and thought-provoking, and are you doing it in a way that that does leave room for that discussion?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's Blade Runner 2049. It definitely was focused. It's always been, not like the first Blade Runner. It's been a smaller, not smaller in scope. I would say visually it's epic in scope. It's like almost like intergalactic, intersolar system in scope. But but story wise, it's a noir cop. It's the cop and the femme fatale, and there's a rich evil guy or not so nice guy, and there's a bad guy. I mean, the thin plot is basically it's a noir kind of story, but it's of course it's not. It's a lot more complex than that. But the character, I mean, the number of characters and the number of moving parts, it's a very interior story, which is also what Blade Runner 2049 is. And so yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So I mean, that's one way you could do it, is just kind of like focus it, make it more of a more internal story, more atmospheric, and have kind of like there's a lot of science fiction stuff going on in that, like world building stuff, like the city itself, the way the city is set up, the oppressiveness of this, the visual metaphors in both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 are kind of like that conveys a lot of the science fictional stuff is kind of like just ambient in there. So I think that is that's one pivot, I guess you could take away from the cheesy sci that everything is true thing, as you said. Anyways, yeah, you're gonna say something? Go ahead.
No. I just wanted to say that, like, if you mentioned the evil or maybe not so nice guy. I mean, he was definitely evil, the CEO of that corporation, and I think that's my main criticism of the new Blade Runner, is that it was a lot more black and white than the old one. Like the first Blade Runner excelled in making you, in the end, kind of root for the replicants, whereas they are positioned as the antagonists. They are the antagonists, right? Because they're working against the protagonists. But
right.
But you kind of you were kind of on their side. You were kind of sad when Roy died at the end. He had that touching monologue. He didn't end up getting killed by Deckard. He just died of old age, basically. And it was all very moving. And even the corporate behemoth in that movie, right? Tyrell. I mean, he wasn't really a bad guy. He had a naivete to him, and what he had created was bad. But you had a sense that he wasn't fundamentally a bad person. He just maybe lacked some ethical considerations, right? And I think that was the new one's failing, is that it definitely positions the antagonist as just thoroughly evil people. There was nothing redeemable about Tyrell 2.0. I forget his name. And
Wallace.
I kind of missed that. I missed that sort of. I missed the grayness of it.
Huh? Yeah. I guess Wallace is he's a creepy guy. Although, if you have you seen those like little shorts, the lead up, the kind of like the short 5-minute shorts that were released in the lead up to Blade Runner 2049?
No.
Oh, okay, yeah. In those, if you watch the one that has the Neander Wallace character played by Jared Leto, I can't remember which one. If you just watch them, that one makes him slightly more, slightly more gray. Where he, what you discover is that he, I don't want to basically recount the entire canon of Blade Runner 2049, but basically, after Blade Runner the first, there's a replicants rebel, and there is they basically launch an EMP weapon that blacks out, destroys like an entire city, and after that, replicants are banned. Shortly after that, the entire the climate destruction has resulted in the human race basically slowly going extinct because they can't grow any food. Neander Wallace is this kind of like interesting like merger of Tyrell plus a little Elon Musk plus a little bit of all the biggest minds, right? He invents the technology that saves the world. So Neander Wallace is viewed as, he's actually the messiah of the human race in the lead up to the movie, which is why humanity doesn't want to allow replicants to be made again. They ban it, and in the prequel, he asked to let replicants be made because he needs them in order to continue inventing his technologies and running his company in order to continue to keep the human race alive. And so that's kind of he's kind of like they reluctantly give him his tyrannical power, because without him, he also, it's kind of like without him, people would basically no longer exist. So that's kind of the lead up. But if you hadn't seen that, yeah, he's definitely a dark character in the movie. He's a pretty creepy, much more creepy guy than the first Blade Runner. But anyways, yeah. But yeah, I'd recommend checking it out. I mean,
yeah, well, definitely.
Anyways, so I'll jump real quick. I don't want to talk too much about this one, but I recently went back and I played Terminus Machina this week. I don't know, I posted it on the mod DB that I did a live stream where I went back and I played the game that I made. This is my first. I played it. I kind of there's a lot. Well, when you go back and look at any games you made, you're gonna see everything wrong. So I mean, I don't know if you got a chance to take a look at it.
Yeah,
but,
I did a little. Yeah.
Yeah, so I tried it out, and there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I basically did it by myself, and myself and my wife basically did almost all the voice acting for it. So I had never done voice acting in my life, and but I didn't have money. I didn't have nothing, and I just kind of did my best with it. I was really angry at the time because I was working as I mentioned, I was working with like homeless children in the city that I live in, and it was just like really horrible. I was really I was working, and I was working 2 jobs, and I was basically still not able to afford rent. So I was really freaking mad when I made this game, and I was kind of like, basically, I'm gonna give the world a piece of my mind, and nobody's gonna do anything about it because it's a free mod. So go screw yourself, rich banking people. I live in Hawaii, where there's lots of really rich people where I live, and they live right next to me. They're like it's kind of like it's like the Sprawl. I joke. It's have you read Neuromancer?
I have read Neuromancer. If that's what you ask.
There's people who like live in the Sprawl. I was living in the Sprawl, and when I was born, and then I would go to school. My dad taught at a private school, and that's the only reason why we could afford it. So I was living in like the ghetto side and the Sprawl, and then I would go to school in the Villa Straylight, and then at the end of the day, I'd come back home to the Sprawl. That's basically like so. It just got me. It's a very strange upbringing, and that's kind of why if you see things at Terminus Machina, that's like it's a very angry game, just narrative wise. That's a lot of it, and I look back and I'm like, man, I'm a little bit less angry now because I finally figured out a place where I can afford to live not on the main island. If you ever come to Hawaii, don't go to the one with the Waikiki on it because I'm not gonna rant on that again. But basically, the point is that it's Disneyland looks great, but if you have to work in Disneyland, it's not the happiest place on earth. Let's put it that way.
Right.
The people who work there, yeah, it's a cyberpunk dystopia that's papered over with a beautiful paradise. Underneath is a lot of homelessness, and that's what I was dealing with. So a lot of the Terminus Machina, the character is a homeless person, right? That's kind of the nexus, the crux of it was not the UNATCO agent that's making a 6-figure salary to go save the world from terrorists. Just some homeless asshole who thinks he's gonna be some kind of activist. This is when Anonymous and that whole thing was kind of big. 2009 financial collapse was also big, and so that was kind of Terminus Machina, and I don't want to tell you the whole story, but basically I don't know what if you got a chance to play it. The main thing I liked about it, going back and looking at it, was I shouldn't say what I liked about it. Something such a elitist, but the features that I added, I hope that it was at least a little bit interesting. I know they weren't 100%. They weren't I didn't implement it in a lot of them the best way. It was insanely hard. I couldn't even beat my own first level of the first little 30 minutes of it. It was pretty hard. I mean, I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on it? I don't know. What do you think?
No, I must admit I didn't get that far either because I think I died of starvation during the tutorial.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah, you're right. It was a pretty hard game. No, I think I was really impressed with the new features just because I liked that idea of not being the special agent with all the guns. That resisting the lure of the power fantasy can be very difficult when you're a game developer because it just feels good as a player to have a big gun and knowing how to use it. But I think there's a lot of merit in casting the player as an underdog in every sense of the word. Someone who has to be smart and stealthy and tricksy to get by. And I was pretty impressed with both the narrative intention behind the features you'd added, and also the fact that you had managed to add them, because I know what it's like to make new interface stuff for Deus Ex, and it's hell. It is hell, and I can't believe that you managed to add a whole bunch of new interfaces on your own. So, yeah. But
thanks.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh no! I was gonna say thanks. You're making my head swell up, but yeah, keep going.
Yeah. So the only thing was that I could have really used the tutorial because I really felt totally out of my depth there. I had no idea how to do any of the hacking. I died of starvation, and people were trying to kill me just in the tutorial. That was a bit of a rude awakening. So there was a lot of cool stuff in there. I just didn't really manage to figure much of it. That was my only problem.
Okay. Yeah, no, that was also my problem. I I was like, holy jeez, I didn't realize how hard it was. I think it's kind of the what is it called, the developers blinders. You know, I knew the system so well that it was getting too easy, but it was because I knew the system too well, so I was making it too hard. If I had to go back, I don't really have the time right now to go back and do a lot of bug fixes. If anybody wants to pick up Terminus Machina and make it easier, I can help you get the source and all that stuff. But yeah, it's basically it's. I mean, I'm glad that came through for you. I mean, it really does mean a lot because I know you know it's like the Nameless Mod like this. I'm speaking to the Deus Ex modding mastermind of all time. So him saying that, it means a lot to me. Greatest. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say Steve Tech is the Deus Ex mastermind mod of all time. So I'm not gonna accept that praise.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I shouldn't say the best because I'm friends with Fast Gamer. You know the Nihilum. I'm sure he's on the forums all the time. I'm friends with the creator of Deus Ex, Nihilum. I did a voice on his game, also free voice acting again. So I don't want to say who's the best of all time because I'm gonna piss somebody off. I know, but yeah. I'd say that.
I mean, the reason I would nominate Steve Tech is because he was one of the first people to start modding Deus Ex, and he had I don't know if you were around early enough for that, but he had what the hell was it called? He had a website full of tutorials about modding Deus Ex, and I learned everything that I needed to get started modding Deus Ex, and I even kept using a lot of his articles as reference all the way through TNM. So he was like the person who taught a lot of us how to mod Deus Ex, and his own mod Zodiac was really good as well. So that's why I would say he's like the grand old man of Deus Ex modding.
All right, okay, I'm gonna get him on this podcast someday. Okay, Steve, you're gonna come on hopefully. I think I know who you're talking about. I think it was not is it TAC?
Yeah, like Steve Tech.
Oh, okay, I know that.
TAC's Deus Ex Lab, it's called. I'll throw you a link.
I still had that bookmark somewhere in like Internet Explorer from like ancient history. I know that site because that's where I also learned a lot from that TAC site. So yeah, thanks a lot, TAC. It's anyway. So I guess for Terminus Machina though, it's the I mean, this is something going forward. Again, I'm trying to use it. I played it because I wanted to try to figure out what for example, Deus Ex did right, the Nameless Mod did right. Again, like we mentioned earlier, to recap, trying to make the mistakes. The modding is kind of like this great playground where we can make a lot of mistakes and learn from what you did right, what you didn't do so well, and then make a better thing, right? So I think like, with Terminus Machina, I guess I don't want to recap all the features. You can go read about Terminus Machina. It's on ModsB, and I just uploaded it to Nexus Mods, and it's basically wireless. There's a wireless hacking interface. There's facial, it's like my Total Recall, where you can wear a face and capture people's faces and then use that to impersonate others and etc. There's it's much more oppressive in terms of the what do you call it, the wireless, the surveillance is much harsher. The AI is pretty nasty. There's a hunger system, as you mentioned, and there's the drone bombing thing. I don't know if did you get blown up by a drone in that game? I don't know if that ever happened for you.
No, how does that work?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, there's like a video. If you watch the second promo, basically, if you get caught by the security cameras in the first level, if the alarm sounds, one of the things that happen is they might send, the robot automated security force might send their guys over to come kill you, or a drone will actually fly over your head and drop a missile on you and blow you up. So,
holy shit. Okay.
You know that little screen, the screenshot. That's the what do you call the splash with that big missile, like that. That actually happens in the game. But it's you're probably good at Deus Ex, which is why it never happened to you. But if you get caught like on a security camera, then that will happen to you. So anyways, I'm not saying that we want to do that in the next game, but there's things like one other thing I wanted to do, and I don't know. One thing if I ever make a game, I'm going to tone down the difficulty, but the idea of like in Deus Ex, as you mentioned, like you're kind of the super agent. You're kind of you're basically a one-man army for a lot of it, and that's kind of a plot point in Liberty Island. Is like, well, you just kill everybody, and we'll just, I guess, Gunther Herman's like, I guess I'll just come and mop up all your mess, like with the UNACO guys. so there's kind of a super, it's, as you said, power fantasy kind of thing going on. So I wanted it to kind of, in terms of talking, I wanted it to be a little bit more like, in asymmetrical warfare, you are definitely the underdog. You're the smaller side of that asymmetry. And so the, active AIs, I don't know. I haven't played that many of these modern games, but I mean, I wanted it to feel more like, you are being sought after, and like, even trying to hack wirelessly, you could get caught. And if you get caught in the middle of your hacking, they will come. Well, I guess in Deus Ex, you could fail and set off an alarm. But yeah, in Terminus Machina, the AI will actually come to your location, so they'll actually go out of their way to find you based on your GPS kind of stuff. So I want it to feel more oppressive, and a little bit more Fallout. There's a little, this crafting system, so it's got some things that happen in Fallout later on, Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas. I don't know where I was going with this. But I don't know. Yeah. So in terms of like, I guess I don't want to. You have to scope it again. So I don't want to implement every single thing because that could be a lot. But I don't know where I'm going with this. But basically, yeah. Thanks for taking the time to at least try Terminus Machina. And thanks. I'm gonna play the Nameless Mod. I do my winter Deus Ex. What do you call? I replay it, and I'm gonna replay the Nameless Mod again. And I think I'm gonna side with the goats this time. I don't know. I can't remember the fact. Was it the goat guys? The goat. The goats versus the who? I can't remember that.
Yeah, the goats, right?
Goats versus llamas. Is that what it was?
Yeah. There's Planet Deus Ex versus World Corp, and then there's the goats versus the llamas. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, Anyway, so let's see. In terms of the Nameless mods, like, is there anything that you think like the Nameless mod did? Because I didn't yet have the time to play, but is there anything you think like the Nameless mod did, or a feature that you added in the Nameless mod that you feel like that? I know there's a lot. What are some things that you think improved Deus Ex, or things that you added that you thought really worked well, or people said worked well in the Nameless mod?
I think I don't think any of the stuff we added necessarily improved the game much, but I think we kind of lucked out in a way in how we implemented some of the existing systems, because obviously the balance of resources is huge. It's a huge thing in Deus Ex. Like half of the game is resource management, and we balanced that a lot tighter, and that meant I think we may have modified the lockpicking a little bit. Maybe not, but it meant that because you had less lockpicks and less multi-tools at your disposal, actually leveling up those skills became more important, and finding or buying those tools also became more important. So the whole system, I think, was less sloppily implemented in the Nameless Mod than in Deus Ex. It also makes the game a little tougher, obviously, because you can spend your resources unwisely and you'll be worse off for it. But it isn't possible to get stuck, at least. So I think that was the main thing we did right. It's just we implemented the existing features and dynamics of the game quite well. And of course we could do that because we had the advantage of having played the original game several times. And like that's an advantage you don't have when you're making a video game. You don't know what the video game is going to be like until you're done with it, and then it's too late, kind of. So actually making DLC or making a sequel or anything like that, usually those things turn out to be much better than the original, because at that point the developer finally understands what they're working on, and that's the same when you're a modder.
That's definitely true. I definitely like the Deus Ex. I mean, again, a lot of people should thank the modders, because I think a lot of people might not even play Deus Ex without a lot of the gameplay, visual improvements. I think we mentioned a few of them. I think a lot of that. The people who, I mean, there's people who are like the old school guys who will just still play vanilla fine, but a lot of newer players might get turned off if it weren't for these improvements that have been made over time through the modding community. So that's really that's definitely true. I think like I'm trying to think. Trying to think of something about the names. I had a lot of things. I remember playing the first time. I was like, I don't want to say that it's like this is better than Deus Ex or something, but I remember feeling like it definitely felt like this. Yeah, it was. I mean, because you had a lot of time to improve on things that were existing in Deus Ex, gameplay and feature wise. There were things that were better. I mean, I remember being tighter. I remember. I don't know if you guys made too many artificial intelligence AI Did you guys mod the AI at all? I remember it being feeling better though, and like, did you guys change it, the AI?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We did make a few improvements of it. We changed the numbers and tweaked things a little bit.
Yeah, I like the AI. Like I remember there's like akimbo pistols. I think that was in. There's a few other Half-Life mods, but I hadn't seen that before. There's like a dual wielding. There was like the augmentations, like the uses of them. They felt much more balanced and useful. I remember like in Deus Ex, that's one thing is like once I got the health regeneration aug, I was kind of like, I'm like Superman. Like I'm never gonna die again. Basically, after I kind of leveled that up a little bit. And I always felt in Deus Ex, like once I got that, I was kind of just like playing the game. I was kind of like clicking to continue the story because it almost got too easy. If you get certain augmentations and certain skills, if you got like I don't know, like the sniper skill plus the health regen, it was really tough. I found that it got really easy even on like the harder difficulty settings. But I felt like that was balanced better in the Nameless mod. And I mean, this is a tough thing to balance. It's tough to balance an RPG. Generally speaking, it's a massive, right? It's a massive one. But you guys did a great job with that, and the story is. I love the concept of the forum. I think of it. It's almost like it's like the Matrix. In the Matrix, they had the residual self-image, and so it was like the residual self-image of the internet is the way I think of Forum City. It's like
that was like, really controversial, though.
Oh yeah, was it?
That was. There was a lot of people who hated that. Like when the game was getting publicity, like when the Nameless Mod was getting publicity for being huge and ambitious, most of the kickback we got, or the backlash, was people just hating the concept, just hating the concept. So
really,
yeah, I don't think that did us any favors, but I mean that was the premise of the game, so whatever.
I guess, yeah. Well, I guess it's kind of like when you start one of those, like, like when I started Terminus Machina, I was like, I gotta blow off some steam from like, working, and I'm just gonna like dick around with, Deus Ex. And, maybe I'll make. I think I was just like, I took a picture of like William Gibson's face. I'll put William Gibson's face on a character, and that'll be funny, and I'll put him in the bathroom. That's funny. That was like a little joke, right? And I think William Gibson actually shows up in Terminus Machina at some point, and I think he drops a line from Neuromancer. I think he says something like, the future is here, it's unevenly distributed, and then that's all he does. And that was like it was a joke when I started, but like, a year and a half later, it's like it's a whole freaking mod with like all these added features and stuff. And I didn't predict that. Like I just got deeper and deeper into it, and I almost gave up a lot of the times because it was so tough, right? But with the Nameless mod, as I take it, right, it's a bunch of, it kind of, maybe it started. I don't know I don't know the whole lore, but it seems like a lot of friends on the forum, right, kind of. We wanted to, get together and work on something. A lot of people just kind of modding. Maybe it was it seems like it maybe started as kind of a jokey thing, and then it got more and more serious. Is that kind of how it happened, or what do you?
Yeah. So I think it started as just Lawrence, who ended up being our producer. He just wanted to get into modding. He wanted to practice some level design, so he made a small level, and then when he was working on it, he was like, "Oh, I should put some characters in here. I should put a bit of narrative in here." And then he just jumped on the Planet Deus Ex forums and was like, "Hey, I think I'm gonna put some people in here, like some forumites." And I think at that point his idea was just, he's just gonna have some stupid whatever story, and then the characters will just happen to be named after whoever on the forums volunteer, because that's funny. So he could just name the characters after them, but that would be about it. That generated a lot of interest because people want to see themselves in a game, right?
Right.
And then about 11 days into the project, I kind of heard about it and jumped in. I was like, "Hey, you guys need a writer. That's weird. Everyone has writers, but nothing else. So now I'm just gonna exploit this opportunity to become your writer." And then to me, it made sense to take it all the way and say, well, if you're naming people after the forum goers, forumites, then you might as well also set it forums, just make it fully strange, right? So that was where that came from.
Oh, okay, yeah. That kind of seems, yeah. It makes, yeah. That is kind of what I kind of suspected. I mean, I like it is kind of weird. It's just kind of like this thing where you have this. I guess that's the similarity between Deus Ex and this is you have kind of this cartoonish, it's cartoonish. Premise, kind of as you said, like it's kind of a little bit cheesy. everything is true conspiracy thing. Like that part of it is kind of like, what? Really? The aliens and all that, and but then the story itself is actually really well told, really serious. The characters are, there's a lot of deep world building and characters inside of that kind of weird premise. And I think Nameless Mod also kind of captures that in the sense it's kind of a weird, like, really, like, forums, like the Game Spy forum is a city, like what the hell, like the I think I was at the like the Alpha Deus Ex. I mean, I remember the Alpha forum, and then there's the all these different forums are actually places, and they're like talking about the firewall, like what is it? No flame war. Nobody starts flame wars on my watch. It's like the moderator stomping on flame wars. I was like, what is this? This is like I was expecting it just be kind of like a long running joke, and in a certain sense, on one sense, it kind of is, in the same sense that Deus Ex is a long running joke on all these conspiracy theories, and it's kind of funny, but also it's also, the more you play it, it kind of like, it's almost like the bait that tricks you into falling down the rabbit hole. It's actually just like a really intricate, like well written, conspiratorial, like lots of twists and turns and factions and characters and personalities and betrayals and lots of mystery and lore. It's like so deep, you can keep digging deeper and deeper, and like, wow, this is like a whole another, it's not actually just like a little a meme. It's actually like an entire world that's real with moving parts. And I thought that was like really like it definitely tricked me into playing it more, and not just going, oh, Forum City. But I can see what you mean, that it kind of, people might have been more dismissive.
I think part of the problem was that I don't know if this is still a thing, but back then when most of internet communication happened on PHP forums or whatever, there was this thing called forum fanfiction, and it was the worst thing this side of slash fiction, right? It was terrible, and it was always terrible because people with no writing talent or experience would band together in groups and try to manage this narrative together. And it's like, when you can't even write alone, then don't try to write with other people. It's like forum fan fiction is like the worst genre of fiction outside of 50 Shades of Grey. So I think that's what tainted the project a lot as well. People heard about the premise and it was like, oh, so it's like forum fan fiction but playable? That sounds terrible. And that does sound terrible. It's just that it was a lot more, like, the narrative was a lot more managed than that. And it was a lot more restrained than normal forum fan fiction. So it may have started that way, but I mean, 7 years of work on it, it's gonna end up having something to it.
Yeah, 7 years. I mean, that's like. I mean, people have said, you kind of like, it deserves an award. It's almost like a unicorn, right, of modding. It's like this thing at that time. 7 years, you see things just they disappear, right, and never get released. And there's still like a long list of Deus Ex mods that to be released. And I think like, so that's like, and then the fact it's all volunteer, everybody just so many people. I mean, like, I've worked on some teams. I worked on multiple teams that I think some of the Half-Life ones that I mentioned kind of never really got released. It's like somebody's working on this. Yeah, we're gonna make this big MMO. We're gonna make this big, great game. It's gonna have like at the time mind blowing features like, I don't know, jumping off all the walls and skywalking and all, we're gonna shoot roosters out of our guns and all this crazy stuff. And then everybody just a year later, oh, I got a job at EA, bye, and everybody's gone, right? And so it's amazing that you guys. Yeah, I mean, I remember I listened to a podcast where you talked about, you kind of had to, you assumed that people were going to be coming in, trying it out, kind of trying out modding and then leaving, and so you kind of work that into you kind of like bake that into the cake of assuming people were not going to stay. So how did you handle that? You can talk a little bit about that part of it.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, we did have a core team, right? We had a handful of people, I think like 10 to 12 people, who were there for most of the project. Maybe they joined like 3-4 years, but they stuck it out until the end. I think a lot of it was down to timing, because Lawrence and I were both just starting high school when we started the Nameless Mod, and so that was perfect, because you have infinite time in high school. You're not doing anything in high school, so yeah, exactly. So that was plenty of time for the first 3 years, and then life happens for a little bit, and then university begins, and university is like, I guess to some people it's a ton of work, but I was studying film, so whatever. It's like there's nothing to it. So I had another 5 years of, well, 3 actually, of being able to work on the game, right? So those 7 years were perfectly positioned. Like I started it at the same time as I started high school, and I finished it pretty much right before I got my bachelor degree. So it just fit perfectly into my life, and I think Lawrence felt the same way. And immediately after the Nameless Mod was out, like I think we patched it for like half a year or something, and then we got lives. Like then like there's no way we could have kept working on the mod for another year or so, because then university was over and Lawrence went and got a job, and I started my master's thesis or my master program. So yeah, it was just well timed in that sense. And because of that, we had the central management group that could keep working on it no matter what, even if it was just down to us. There were long stretches of time, maybe like 3 or 4 months, where it was like 1 or 2 people working on it once in a while. And that was when there were exams going on, or when people just, there was like a confluence of matters that made people busy all of a sudden. But there was always 1 or 2 people working on it. And then eventually the team would form back up, kind of like they would turn to the project, they would have time again. And as long as people were working on it, then it wasn't dead. But yeah, as you say, we also ended up kind of planning for the outer echelon of the team, that it wasn't a big deal if they didn't, like if they fell off the project or if they didn't deliver for a while. We would try to match people to things that fit their style. So we would spend a little time trying to figure out what they were good at, and then we would give them something that matched that. The best example is the soundtrack. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I love that soundtrack.
So we would have one person who was really good at electronica, one person who was really good at like deep ambient, and one person who was much more analog. And then we would give them, so Leo, who was really good at analog, played guitar for all his tracks and so on. He would get the friendly, kind of warm sounding levels where the analog sound fitted. And then Steve Foxon, who did the sort of dark ambient stuff, he would get the underground labs. And then Grammy Arthur or whatever, who did electronic stuff. What's this? Martin Arm was another one of the major music contributors. So he would get the sort of city levels because his style fit that really well. It was the same thing with the levels. We would try to match levels to people who had a certain style. In the end, we ended up just getting Zero Press to do everything because he was so much better than everyone else. But
wait, which one? Who did the levels?
Sorry. I never really got that cough out. So Zero Presence, Chris Potts, he's called in real life. He's the one who's actually picked up the mod again now. I mentioned that before we started recording, that I published some files from version 105, which never was released originally, but I'd made some things on it, some level stuff and some tweaks. And I finally got around to publishing that earlier this year because people started pestering me about it. But it's just the files. It's not an install or anything. So Zero Presence, who used to do most of the maps on the Nameless Mod, he was by far our best mapper. No offense to all the other mappers, including myself. He's leagues ahead of me. So he made all the best maps in the game, and he sort of wanted to get back into the hobby. So he picked up the 105 files I'd published, and he's found a couple of people to work with, and is kind of trying to polish it off and add a little more content and put it out there as a proper patch.
I see. Okay, so I'm gonna tell the lead guy to go scout him out. No, he's doing this as a
sure.
Yeah, he's doing it as a well, it's a mod. You can't sell it obviously, but yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, also, yeah, we are looking at well, we're not gonna have a huge team, but yeah, we are looking at people who are like basically the bar for entry is you have to be like basically a hardcore. You have to go on like Deus Ex Hell or one of those Deus Ex meme things. You have to get every single joke on okay. Deus Ex joke list, and if you can't get all the jokes, you're fired basically, or you don't get the job. That's what it is. No, it's not. It's not a purity test of your Deus Ex, but it is people. We want to make something that is like, people who are dedicated, and like this is kind of why I wanted to talk to the hardcore body community, because obviously you have to love a game to a certain degree to take that much time to do something that you're never going to be paid for. I mean, you're gonna be paid in a certain amount of education and skills, but it's basically free labor for the love of it. And so I think that yeah, I mean, it is interesting to hear all that you said about the way that you handled that. I tried to like continue Terminus Machina, as you said, like life happens. Like I started Terminus Machina. I wasn't in. It's kind of insane. I had a wife, and I think my daughter was born, and then I kind of like started it as a way to like release some stress, and yeah, I think I might have been. I might have been working on it a little bit. Like I was basically working on it in the midnight hours, but you know, it was basically, you know, kind of like something to do to relieve the stress and anger that I felt towards a lot of things, and just kind of like do something, because I hadn't found a lot of games that I loved at that time, and Deus Ex was one that I kept playing, so I was like, well, maybe I should just try to make another one. And so, but when I tried to do some try to do some collaboration, I just found it really difficult. I'm not the best, you know, manager. Like even on Neophyte, I tried to manage a few people who contributed. I totally blew it. I didn't have good direction on the soundtrack. I ended up redoing the whole soundtrack myself because I changed the game in the middle of things, and then I had to throw stuff out. So I mean, the fact that you managed to get all those people working on volunteering, I don't know. I looked at the credit list. It's just massive. It's just like, holy Jesus Christ! Like, how did you even do that? So that's a testament to you guys' project management skills, and you know, and the fact that it turns out, and it doesn't just turn off like total chaos, like it very well might have. Is like just like yeah, you should get an award for that.
the thing that proved to be the key to that was that everything kind of went through a couple of people. Like we had gatekeepers for the content, so it wasn't anarchy. Like everyone had to submit their stuff to Lawrence and I, and then we would check it out and see if it was any good and provide feedback on it and so on and so forth. So it was a very top-down. I mean, it was a very flat hierarchy. It was me and Lawrence on the same level, and then everyone else. But it was very centralized in that way, and I think that helped, because otherwise files would have gotten lost. The quality level of things would have varied even more drastically. But I mean, other than that, I learned everything about managing a game project from the Nameless Mod. I didn't have any management skills. I was a 15-year-old kid.
That's pretty crazy too. You're 15 years old. Wow.
Yeah, I mean the high school, right?
Yeah.
And by the time we stopped, I was 22. So obviously I had some growing to do as well. But there was just a lot of lessons in there, both in terms of actual game development. Like I got much better at writing. I got much better at level design. Not good enough, but much better. And I learned a lot about just working with people and people of different skill sets, people of different mindsets, and making everything fit together and making everyone work towards the same goal, basically. And then finally, I will say, like, I think we have like 75 people on the credits list. At any one time, there were maybe 25 people working on it. No more than that. So it wasn't an enormous team at any particular point. It was just that people came and went, so it added up to a lot of contributors. And in the end, in the last sort of year of development, it was pretty much just the core team, because at that point we realized that we had to stop adding things and focus on just finishing it. And so we needed to keep the people around who were willing to dedicate their time to it without having that payoff of being able to add their own creativity to it, right? At that point, you're just working towards the finish line.
Oh yeah, polishing phases. Yeah, that's the one where, you know, that's what separates the true game developers from the people who like to dabble. It's like the grunt work, you know, just like getting the bugs out. Oh my god, you know, because it's not the fun part, right? That's the work part, right?
Yeah. And there's a saying, and it's so true, and it's a joke, but it's so true as well, that the first the first 90% of the game takes 90% of the time, and then the last 10% of the game takes the other 90% of the
Yeah,
I believe that's
exactly. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's that's true of, like, I mean, yeah. I can't speak. Yeah, with Terminus Machina, there's definitely. I was like, I kind of just, some people, if anybody complains about things that were broken, is because I just gave up. I ran out of time, and but you know, it is like the polishing. It's not the fun part of it, but it is the necessary part. If you really want the game to be well received, well played, I mean, you got to put that amount of time into it. And I think that I mean, I don't want to rag on modern games anymore, but kind of like a lot of the complaints have been, with a lot of the asset flip kind of stuff is, people just basically getting a bunch of stuff, throwing it into a level, buying it, and then shipping it off, and it's people that are missing that kind of like making it great. I mean, having assets that you got, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, putting things in the game, but actually making it into a cohesive, at least something that makes sense, something that is interesting to play, has that is more is a finer art than just having some pretty pictures and then having some bits of interesting fan fiction and then dropping it into an engine. I think that kind of stuff is that's something that I think that's what separates. I think if there's something that should separate the people who the games that should maybe have success on Steam versus not, it should be stuff like that, rather than like who has $2 million for marketing. Anyways, but yeah, on Nameless Mod, I would say, is there anybody? Okay, here's one more. I have to ask this question before I forget. So that guy who does the World Corp voice, can I get him? Do you have that guy?
You mean Scara? Scara King or what?
The guy who, is it he's the World Corp? The guy who has that really that.
Yeah, like the
sleazy
CEO
tone.
of World Corp, he's white. He's yellow, like his skin is yellow, and his
that guy, yeah.
That guy?
Is he still around, or is he what?
I mean, you can talk to him. I guess he's a professional voice actor. He's also the guy who did Tristcon, by the way.
Oh, he did Tristcon too. Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, he's a professional voice actor. He generously volunteered to do all of the voiceover, and it was insane. I had to go to Hamburg and record with him where he lived for some reason, and we just spent a whole weekend crunching on it, and I was exhausted at the end of it, but he was still just full of energy. I don't know how he did that. He was the one doing the actual work, so. But I mean, I guess I can put you in touch, but right now, as far as I know, he's doing his own game. Actually, he's working on like a zombie game of some kind.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I was just trying to think of characters and stuff that I liked from it. There's actually we could probably go on for a long time with this stuff. But here's something I have to ask everybody. One more thing I have to ask before you go is on the cyberpunk topic, because this is the cyberpunk podcast. What is your favorite what is your favorite cyberpunk work? Maybe a book, a game, and a movie. Like what are your top cyberpunk?
Right. I mean, the game is that's self-explanatory, right? We've been talking about. Deus Ex is definitely my favorite. Not just my favorite cyberpunk game, but my favorite game. So that's easy. Yeah. Book. I would say Snow Crash. I know it's sort of that is cyberpunk. It's kind of on the fringes of cyberpunk, but it is cyberpunk. I love Neuromancer, but I feel like Snow Crash got it right. Snow Crash was closer to predicting how things actually turned out. And of course, he had, it was written later, so more of the developments he wrote about had actually happened. But still, I feel like Snow Crash just, with that sort of satirical bent that it had, hit the zeitgeist a little better. It predicted things a little better than Neuromancer. Although I don't know if it necessarily has the sort of literary reach that Neuromancer has. Neuromancer is a very literary work as far as I'm concerned, whereas Snow Crash is a little bit more pop culture. But I love Snow Crash very much. And as for movie, I mean, that's also pretty easy. That's the first Blade Runner, which is actually probably my favorite movie of all time. So that was also like the standard I applied to the sequel, that it was a sequel to my favorite movie of all time, and I don't hate it. And that's the greatest compliment that I can give to any movie, I think.
All right, so we're two for 3. No, I'm just kidding. I did like Snow Crash also as a big influence on my thinking and everything. I was exposed to. I didn't know what the word meme was until I think I read Snow Crash. Right. And that aspect of the internet, I think it's definitely true. Like I think of Snow Crash is kind of like it is. Yeah, it's very pop culture. It's like hero, protagonist. Come on, man.
Yeah, but it's satire, right?
Yeah, it's almost like a Simpsons South Parky edge to it. It's much. Which is, Simpsons and South Park are, they're pop culture. It has much more to. It's like it's from an angle of the culture. It's from the angle of the the milieu itself. And yeah, I think Gibson is yeah, definitely. You're right in that it's much more literary. It's much more. He read a lot of actual books. He's an English major. I think he said he was a professional student for decades or something like that. So he's read a lot of books, and it's much more. It's like almost like an anthropological study of 2060 in a certain sense, and crossed with literary work. And where Snow Crash is kind of, it's very much about like the Western. It was much more attuned to that culture. You could tell that Stevenson spent a lot of time. He probably spends a lot of time in places like Forum City, the real world versions of them. You get that from him. I think I get that from him anyway. So I think that it is a great work. I mean, I love Snow Crash. I love a lot of the characters, and I love the tone is very sharp, and it's not quite at the level of Gibson, but it's got its own appeal to it, definitely. Well, Blade Runner, I talk about Deus Ex and Blade Runner on every single cast, so I'm glad to hear that at least I'm not totally out of touch. I'm still cool in the cyberpunk world because you think that those are too good.
Sorry to be predictable, I guess.
Blade Runner. I think it's for good measure. I mean, there, like Deus Ex, it's Blade Runner. Like Citizen Kane. I think I made a joke. I was like, when the aliens, when like the GameSpy aliens. Oh, spoiler. When the aliens destroy Earth and they record the history, it's gonna be like the pyramids, the printing press, and then like Deus Ex. Those are gonna be like what they read about. Maybe, and then Blade Runner, Deus Ex. And then, the artificial singularity that took over the planet. Those are going to be like the key points in history. But I do think it is kind of pivotal. In the cyberpunk world, to mainstream world, they're like, what are you talking? All the sheeple are like, what the hell are these weirdos talking about? But in the cyberpunk world, they were pivotal things. Anyways, yeah. So I mean, sorry, you've been here for a while. If there's anything else you want to talk about, things you want to mention, the mic is yours. I think I've gone through everything I need to go through.
No, I'm just here to shoot the shit. I don't really have any agenda. So if you feel like we're done, then I'm gonna say thanks for having me on.
Okay, but before I go, I know I'm forgetting one person. Okay, here's one thing. Who's your I shouldn't say who's your favorite mod of all time, but have you played Nihilum? Deus Ex Nihilum?
Much to my regret, no. I didn't play any mods for Deus Ex after TNM because my install messed up. Like, it was just too corrupted by TNM. So it's not until I actually realized why am I not just installing Deus Ex again via Steam this time and then leaving my TNM install cordoned off. So now that I have a clean install of Deus Ex, then I can finally get around to playing Nihilum as well.
All right, there you go, Fast Gamer. So yeah, he's gonna pay me some money for that. No, I'm just kidding.
Sure.
No, he's been a big help too. I should say before we go also, if it wasn't for Off Topic Productions, for those who don't know, this is they're who produced the Nameless Mod. I, along with Tax, Deus Ex, Steve Tax, Deus Ex tutorials, and the Nameless Mod. Whenever I had a problem, I was on the Off Topic Productions forums asking for help. So yeah, Terminus Machina would never have happened without Off Topic Productions. So thanks for existing and putting up with a lot of newbies asking questions.
Yeah, I don't think I was particularly helpful there. I don't recall ever being that big of a help to aspiring modders, but I'm glad that the forums that I ran could be of service.
Yeah, I don't remember who exactly was on. I think it was some of the Revision folks. Here's one more question. Revision is apparently on Steam. Is that how did they do that? How did they get on Steam?
I think they went through Square Enix. I think they made a deal with Square in return for kind of endorsing Human Revolution or something, and then they got on there as part of that push. We tried it originally. I remember we tried it in 2009 when we released the game, and got told that no, that Steam only hosts Half-Life mods, Half-Life 2 mods. Like basically, if you're not modding Half-Life 2, you go screw yourself. So Yeah. Now there's the workshop, of course, but there's no Deus Ex workshop.
Yeah, so it's not so that's why I was like, why is Revision on Steam? Are those guys still working on?
I'm not sure. I think so. I know a couple of the people who worked on Revision helping us out. TNM 105 project.
So they're helping out on that. Okay. Yeah, so I'm trying to talk to everybody. There's a couple of new mods that have just dropped on. There's one called like the Vanilla something mod. It was the
Vanilla Matters. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like brand new to me. I think it just in the last few days, somebody just started modding Deus Ex. I went into the Discord channel and I was like, they're all asking the same questions, like, how do I put a texture on a character's face? Why can't I make new character? Here's one more question: how is it possible to make new character models in Deus Ex?
No, it is not. Please don't try. That's
they asked. Please don't try. Yeah, I looked into it and I was like, this looks like you basically have to be Harvey Smith or Warren Spector or somebody like that. You're never gonna get it done.
Yeah, because it's vertex animation of all things. So like, there is no skeleton that you can apply the animations to. You have to redo every single animation from scratch, and that like, no.
Yeah. So okay, that's good. Good that we got that answered. Anyway, so I think that's gonna do it. So so I'd like to thank Jonas Waever. Is that correct? Or Waever?
Yeah, that's close. Yeah, nicely done.
Okay, and the American version, Jonas Waever. I'd like to thank Jonas for for being on the Silver Spook podcast. It's been great, nostalgic, enlightening conversation. Everybody immediately go out and reinstall Deus Ex right now and play it again, and then play the Nameless Mod. Wait, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, we invoked the name Deus Ex. Will now. That's how it works.
Okay, there you go. So and then play Deus Ex, then play the Nameless Mod. If you have a chance and you have a strong stomach and you get really good at Deus Ex, play Terminus Machina, because I still can't play it. Pretty tough. Or you can put some cheats on. I saw this Russian guy Let's Play it with like all the cheats on, so you can do that too. Anyways, yeah. I was kind of pissed off because he didn't. He's like just put all the cheats on.
Come on, man.
Come on. And he just flew to the end of the level. Anyways, so thanks a lot. Anything else, Jonas? Where can we find you? Anything you want to say about your company? Yeah.
Buy all my games. I mean, obviously. I mean, if you're really into Cyberpunk, you will probably not care about any of my games, because unfortunately they have nothing to do with Cyberpunk. But there's a lot of overlap gameplay-wise between Deus Ex and Clandestine. So if you're interested in like hacking and co-op and spies, then consider throwing some money at Clandestine on Steam.
All right, so Clandestine, and I believe was it Vikings?
But that's a very different game.
Oh,
but yeah,
okay.
That's our latest one. Yeah, Expeditions Viking.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So check out his games. Help him out. He's an indie developer. Okay, take all that money you're gonna spend on the $2,000 worth of money you're gonna spend on loot boxes and leveling up your wizards and all that stuff. Pay to level. Spend that on this guy, okay? Because those big companies don't need any more money. I'm a big promoter of indie developers. That's why I always do this. Anyways, so thanks a lot. And I'm Silver Spook. I can find me, just Google Silver Spook, and everybody knows where to find me. Are you on Twitter or anywhere if you want to reach you personally or reach you?
No, these days I'm managing the Logic Artists Twitter account, and that's it. So Logic Artists on Twitter would be my suggestion.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and catch you next time. In the meantime, do you have a single fact to back that up? Drop some Deus Ex quotes so I'm gonna edit it in after. What's your favorite Deus Ex meme?
It's been so long. I don't know.
You know?
Greasy Greasels?